of their beliefs and practices. This makes it difficult to offer accurate generalizations as to how they spread. Do not take this as saying that your religion needs to spread, at least not in the spread the gospel fashion. Proselytization is a relatively new trend in religion that really only took root in Judeo-Christian religions, but because they now dominate the entire world, it is an easy but fallacious thing to assume that when looking at how religion spreads, it should be through a Judeo-Christian lens. Many polytheistic religions did not require conversion or see conversion as a moral act. Their religion may have been true and others false, but their tenets did not usually drive people to spread it. Instead, assuming the religion was more of a requirement of integration into their society. However, even if they did not rely so heavily on proselytization, polytheistic religions did spread. The simplest example of how is that of Quirinus, a god of war that was also linked with dinkel wheat in the Roman mythos. Quirinus was originally a god of the Sabines, a people neighboring the Romans who were defeated in war. The Sabine people were absorbed into the Roman Republic, and the cult of Quirinus became part of the early Roman mythology, becoming connected to the story of Romulus, one of the founders of Rome. The integration of new gods and beliefs, not wholly requiring people to reject them, but finding a new place for their gods in this new pantheon, makes integration of a people into the polytheistic religion a lot smoother. If there are already a large number of gods, especially if that number has changed over time, then it may be natural for its followers to let people add their own gods. Comparatively, if there are only a small number, say 2 or 3, its followers may be less inclined to add new gods because followers all agree these are the only gods they accept. Interconnectivity, religion and culture. One of the most difficult questions is how to communicate your world building without info dumping, but one excellent way is to show how it affects ordinary people on an ordinary daily basis. This is what culture is. For example, we say bless you when someone sneezes, a remnant of religious practices from the past that have little practical value now, but we say it anyway. In Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings, Vorinism has a strong belief in gender roles, that men are leaders and warriors and women are scholars and artists. Because of this, men are not meant to read and write but women are. One major outcome of this is that academia in his world is dominated by women. They are the ones who learn history, mathematics, and science, and this heavily affects political power dynamics within the society in relation to gender as well as the economy. Women are the engineers, they are political advisors, they are the innovators of society, allowed to occupy wealthy positions. At the same time, Vorinism places a huge emphasis on modesty. Women are expected to dress with a safe hand, a glove. It is against social protocol to look inside a woman's glove. More importantly, the average citizen will not understand the nuances of their religion, the Latin, and many liturgical rites, but the ideas that affect their daily lives, whether in their speech, how they hold themselves, and their morning rituals will represent the most ingrained and pervasive ideas of that religion without explicitly stating them. When it comes to polytheism, it can be interesting to see how followers of different gods are affected differently on a daily basis. How polytheism works. In with the daily life of mortals is often tied to a cost-benefit analysis of the religion. What do they give up, and what do they gain? Perhaps it is eternal life, maybe eternal donuts, or maybe they have to kill their children. Religion plays into the things that the ordinary person values, that they are willing to give up, and those things that they would be willing to keep worshipping in order to attain. What these things are will vary between societies, geographies, and ages. Polytheism and magic systems. Fantasy worlds often have magic systems, and interconnecting this with the polytheistic religion is incredibly common. 29 If the gods are definitely real, and they interact with people, then it is common for magic to be divine, coming from the gods themselves like in David Edding's Selenium. Within that, polytheistic religions typically divide powers up among the gods, meaning some have control of life, or death, or fire, or nature. Channeling or worshipping one god gives you certain types of magic. Polytheism provides a great way to play with the limits, costs, and weaknesses we discussed in parts 11, X, and 9. Perhaps using a god's power also exposes you to their weaknesses, or the god themselves limits how much power a person can have, or maybe you must bargain for magic from that god, putting a price on it like their soul, which we often see shows like Supernatural. Likewise, if gods control the magic in the world, then it is subject to their decisions and whim. If they are very temperamental, then there is nothing to suggest magic has to be reliable or consistent. Perhaps it can be tied in with sacrifices. There are endless possibilities for an author playing with divine magic. Interconnectivity, religion and politics. Religion and politics have a long-standing and complicated relationship, but we will be focusing on a couple of factors that are particularly pertinent when world-building polytheism. Firstly, religion has often been used to validate political authorities like the Chinese emperor ruling via the mandate of heaven. Secondly, religion often comes into conflict with political authorities, such as during the investiture controversy in 1077, where Pope Gregory VII and Holy Roman Emperor Henry VI went head-to-head over the right to appoint bishops. It resulted in the emperor himself trekking for days across Europe in a blizzard to beg the Pope for his absolution. In contrast, political authorities in societies with polytheistic religions do not tend to rely as much on the religion validating their political powers, nor do they challenge political authorities as much as monotheism. This is because polytheism tends to create decentralized religious power. 30. This is because they tend to divide into smaller factions as groups of people emphasize one or a selection of the group of gods over others. Political authorities, be it a king or an emperor, have their power spread across all of their land. Monotheism is rarer than polytheism, but historically, it has more often manifested in a single or few unified factions able to garner the support, money, and widespread geographical institutionalism necessary to challenge the political powers in the land. Because of this, a certain unity is struck between the two powers, as it was in Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and Zoroastrianism, where the religious power validates the secular powers. In contrast, the smaller factions in polytheism, each with their own hierarchies, are less likely to attain the support, money, and widespread geographical institutionalism necessary to challenge the political powers. This is because they do not as often have centralized power. Please see the notes for important exceptions to this. Instead, it is the factions within the religion that tend to exert influence over smaller areas or cities. For example, both Athens and Sparta recognized the whole Greek pantheon, but Athens took up Athena and emphasized wisdom while Sparta placed importance on Apollo and Artemis and emphasized the hunt, poetry, and archery. 31. Interconnectivity, religion and economy. In G.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series, the faith of the Seven 32 plays the role of the social safety net in the economy. We see this variously through Brienne's experiences at the September, the actions of the High Sparrow, and other remarks in the series. Through this role in the economy, the reader sees that the faith of the seven values humility and caring for the poor, opposes extravagance, and has a strong belief in justice. Polytheism tends to split its followers into factions that emphasize certain values and gods, and one way to well-build all the different gods and their philosophies into your society is to show how they play different roles in the economy. Perhaps the faction that follows the warrior god runs a local militia to protect the town, or the faction following the god of judgment is the court of the land, or the god of commerce uses its money to make loans to those who need it. To continue with the faith of the seven example, which is technically monotheistic, we see the seven different aspects playing different roles in society. The warrior's sons defend the faith and its followers, and the silent sisters, who take on aspects of the stranger, care for the dead, sick, and dying. Giving your polytheistic factions different roles in society, and the economy helps lay out the different values and beliefs surrounding each god without needing to explicitly state them. In the simplest fashion possible, this is showing and not telling. Narrative tension and mythopoeia. In 1931, J.R. Tolkien wrote a poem for his writing club The Inklings, which also included notable fantasy writer C.S. Lewis. It was titled Mythopoeia, and it was about myth-making or creating and writing stories within an invented mythology. Tolkien's Middle-earth is written with a mythological backbone, as are the works of writers like H.P. Lovecraft. While this is the common definition of the word, it has in recent times been used to term the literary trope where gods derive their power from the worship, prayer, or attention of their followers, and so can become stronger or weaker depending on that. 33. If you can imagine Zeus buckling over, getting fat, and becoming exhausted because people have not been killing enough sheep for him, then that is our mythopoeia. The epitome of this is Neil Gaiman's famous work American Gods, where the old gods like Odin and Loki are dying, and the new gods like that of the internet 34 are rising in power, because people believe in them more. This trope is less common, but not impossible, with monotheism. This is because monotheism tends to have an omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent godlike figure. If you could undermine such a being, then why is it the only god? This concept is a common source for conflict in a narrative that focuses on polytheism. In Terry Pratchett's fantastic book Small Gods, gods try to get their followers to undermine the other gods even within the same pantheon to help sustain themselves and boost their power. On the flip side, if people fear their god is dying, then will they naturally consider their options for how they will get more followers, more sacrifices, and more worship? This becomes a problem when a war god can be kept alive simply through violence. If gods live and die by worship, then an author has to consider how this affects the Interactions between different factions that emphasize different gods within the pantheon. On another level, mythopoeia is sometimes reciprocative in that not only do gods live by belief, but they actually change depending on what their followers believe about them. In Rick Riordan's Heroes of Olympus series, two different groups with competing beliefs about what the gods should be like come into conflict. This renders the gods essentially mad and unable to intervene, and has consequences for the story and people at hand. 35. Religious tropes and models. World-building naturally draws on things we see and understand in our world to give our fictional worlds a sense of realism. Because of this, it can be easy to fall into the structural models we see in polytheistic religions like the Greek, Roman, or Norse pantheons we are familiar with in order to construct our own. This is only complicated by the fact that the structure of other polytheistic religions is largely unknown due to there being few records. There are any number of tropes that define these well-known polytheistic religions, but three extremely common ones are that 1. They are based around a generational mythology. 2. They have families of gods with husbands, wives, sons, daughters, and so on. 3. The gods tend to have very human behavior. These are the case in Japanese Shintoism, Norse mythology, Hittite mythology, Greek mythology, Aztec mythology, Etruscan mythology, and many, many more. There is nothing inherently wrong with using these tropes, but one way to differentiate your polytheistic religion would be to draw on the tropes we see in other religious models, whether it be pantheism, monotheism, dualism, animism, shamanism, ancestor worship, and others. There's an interesting mix of monotheism and polytheism in Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, where the original one god broke into 16 different gods, meaning they are sort of individuals, but also part of a greater whole. In Tolkien's mythology, Eru Ilúvatar is the monotheistic one true god, but the angelic beings known as the Valar take elements of polytheism by operating like a family pantheon with husbands, wives, sons, and daughters. They are also made to be far more human while Eru is far more abstract. There is a fascinating mix of shamanism and polytheism in Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, where interacting with this pantheon often requires a state of madness or doing so causes you to go mad. The Dragonlance series has an interesting mix of dualism and polytheism, or more Trinitarianism. There is no supreme god, but there are three groups of gods: the good, the neutral, and the evil, existing in constant balance and conflict. Before Irish mythology was anglicized, it had an interesting mix of polytheism and dualism, where there were two groups of godlike beings, the Tuatha De Danann, who were largely good, and the Fomorians, who were largely destructive gods. The spectrum, superior or otherworldly. Some pantheons feature deities who consider themselves, and actually appear to be superior, and distinctly above humans, while others feature a collection of otherworldly and distant spirits that fulfill roles in the natural world, like in Princess Mononoke and Avatar, The Last Airbender. Your polytheistic religion could be at one extreme or somewhere nearer the middle of the spectrum. Perhaps there are even spirits who consider themselves to exist in service to humanity. Be aware that relying too much on tropes we identify with major pantheons from our world can lead to fictional religious pantheons feeling unoriginal, because the gods are just placeholder deities for Zeus or Poseidon, even if the exact powers, names, gender, or look of the gods differ a little. Mixing tropes from monotheism, mysticism, dualism, shamanism, animism, ancestor worship, as well as Western and Eastern conceptions of what polytheism is, can help your religion stand out as unique. Character development. Fantasy stories often have characters being born into a society with a dominant religion ingrained into it. The thing is, if this religion has any values or beliefs about how we should act with others, then this should be ingrained into most characters. If it is not, then it is not truly ingrained into society. This provides two avenues for character development. 1. This can restrict how characters are willing to act. One example is Scar in Fullmetal Alchemist, whose religion prevented him from performing alchemy, which is the destruction and reconstruction of matter. This meant that he had to figure out how to work around that, and he did so by just destroying without reconstructing. This does also mean that many characters, who are raised in the same society, may have similar morals, which can be less interesting, though it is important to note the moral diversity within very religious countries like the United States, or even medieval Europe. 2. This can also provide a point of tension where the character is forced into situations that challenge their morals, forcing them to change or become more resolute. The story of Daredevil is rife with this. Matt Murdock is repeatedly challenged in his faith, doubting God, and struggling with the desire to not kill a tenet he has stuck to because of a rigorous religious conviction. If a character does not follow these dominant religious values, then the author may have to explain why they do not when everyone else does. This can be as simple as saying they are rebellious, they do not like religion, or they simply were not convinced. There are tales of those in history who rejected religion for these reasons, even when religion was at its most prominent. However, polytheism provides an easy way around this, because different gods can have entirely different values, meaning characters can just pick whichever god they want. Alternatively, having a dominant religion that does not have laws on how characters should act, perhaps focusing on other questions, allows you to have characters who all grow up under the same religion, and do so with a diverse range of morals. The gods do not exist. We cannot dismiss the counterfactual, that the gods of your story do not exist, but people believe them to exist. In some sense, this is an even more interesting avenue for a writer to explore, because it relies on the influence of religion being wholly dependent on the psychology of your characters. That is what they believe to be the action of the gods, what they believe the gods are saying, what they believe the gods are punishing them for. When there is no objective standard to measure this against, religion can become both a cruel and blessed tool in the hands of the right people. Alternatively, you as the author could simply leave it ambiguous as to whether they exist. Summary. 1. While many real-world religions focus on the three questions of how the world came to be, how we should interact with one another, and where we go when we die, that does not mean your fictional one has to answer all or any of them. 2. Polytheistic religions tend to result in a lot variation in religious belief, as people divide into groups that emphasize certain gods for geographical, cultural, and economic reasons. Variation is also dependent on territory, the number of followers, and how old the religion is. 3. Polytheistic religions tend to be more adaptable, and can absorb other religions into them, allowing them to evolve over time. 4. One of the best ways to well build your religion is to show how it affects ordinary people culturally on an ordinary daily basis. 5. Polytheistic religions tend not to compete with regional powers as much as monotheistic religions, though this is not to say they cannot, because they often have a decentralized religious power with multiple groups. 6. Demonstrating how these polytheistic groups all fit into society, and the economy in particular, is a great way to show the diversity of values and beliefs surrounding each god. 7. Where gods live and die by worship, this can be a great source of conflict within the narrative as factions compete or undermine one another. 8. When world building, do not be afraid to mix religious models and tropes. Purely relying on well-known polytheistic tropes can lead to a stale and unoriginal pantheon. Part 13. Hidden Magical Worlds. Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer, the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan, Harry Potter, and The Goblet of Fire by J.A. Rowling, Harry Potter, and The Order of the Phoenix by J.A. Rowling, the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks, Grimm by Stephen Carpenter and Jim Koof, and David Greenwalt, Men in Black by Ed Solomon, Conquistador by S.M. Sterling, Clandestine Days by Tim Markwitz, The Otherworld by Kelly Armstrong, Assassin's Creed, Brotherhood by Jeffrey Yohalam, The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, The Trollhunters series by Guillermo del Toro, Buffy the Vampire Slayer by Joss Whedon, Moon Called by Patricia Briggs, X-Men by Stan Lee, and Jack Kirby, Black Panther by Ryan Coogler and Joe Robert Cole. Hidden magical worlds have been a staple of the fantasy genre since ever. Irish mythology often references the Tir en Ahoig, the land of the youth, and virtually every religion has an unseen world of the dead or of the gods. With the rise of young adult fiction like Colfer's Artemis Fowl, Claire's The Mortal Instruments, and obviously Rowling's Harry Potter, we must consider how to well build these hidden realms logically for a story. In doing so, we will be discussing 1. How the magical world stays hidden. 2. Dealing with discovery. 3. Society's basic functions within a hidden world. 4. Why this society stays hidden. 5. The influence of geography and population. 6. Hidden worlds and narrative. How the magical world stays hidden. Secret worlds stay hidden through any number of methods, but when considering your world building, you need to be able to answer 1. How do they prevent the mundane world from discovering them? 2. How do they prevent people within the society from revealing themselves? We will answer the second of these questions in detail a little later. The answers to these are often closely related to 5 things in world building: powers, technology, appearance, geography, and disbelief. Powers. For example, consider the magic system in your story. It is not uncommon for hidden worlds to have a magical enchantment of sorts that either prevents the mundane world from seeing magical monsters, or accessing magical areas, or prevents magical people from going certain places. This particular strategy is simple but believable world building, especially if there is an historical reason for that enchantment existing. In Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series, the mist was created by a goddess of magic with the intention of making magical things and monsters appear normal to humans. It fits within the wider mythos. In DC's Wonder Woman mythology, the island of Themyscira is protected by a magical barrier that shrouds it from the sight of the rest of the world. However, one challenge to consider here is that this kind of magical method works better with a softer magic fantasy story. In H.P. Lovecraft's works, there is a veil of sorts that prevents mortals from seeing the eldritch horror realities of the world, and where this veil comes from is incredibly mysterious, like an ancient power that none truly understands. This fits perfectly within the incredibly soft magic system of the Elder Gods. In contrast, Brent Week's Lightbringer series has a hard magic system that primarily uses colors to give abilities to individuals. Using the veil in this story would be inconsistent with that magic system, coming across as not only overly convenient, but it would bring into question the rationale behind magic itself. If this is possible, then what else is? Writing a soft magic the veil with inexact rules and limits into a hard magic story can feel like overly convenient world building because magic has otherwise been hard with rules and limits until this. If your story is dominated by a hard magic system, perhaps consider other methods of concealing your world. Technology. A less common, but equally applicable method of hiding is using technology. In Owen Colfer's Artemis Fowl series, the people use superior technology to accomplish the exact same purposes as a magical veil through force fields, cloaking devices, and time fields. If you are looking for a more unique take on the masquerade society, then technology may be one avenue to consider, especially if the magic system does not allow for this. Appearance. A lot of the time, fantasy stories feature a community of humans or human-like beings like enough in appearance to blend in with normal society. This is often for ease of writing, and it is particularly common in young adult fantasy. In the series Grimm, the magical beings can look like humans, act like humans, and think like humans. This means that firstly, there is not the same requirement for that magical or technological veil discussed above, and secondly, and perhaps more importantly, they can identify with mainstream human culture. To compare it to Artemis Fowl, the green-skinned, dwarf-short, half-horse, winged and sparkly fairies would not blend in, and so they require something more to shield them. They do not think the same way as humans and do not as easily build relationships with them. If your hidden peoples can blend in with the normal society 36, it can affect your world building in two important ways. 1. Their hidden world will not necessarily require the heavy magical or technological protection, because the normals will not easily identify them on sight. 2. Those from the hidden world can relate to the normals psychologically. This will cause exchange between their two cultures as they naturally interact in the realms of politics, technology, art, economy, and elsewise. The flip side of this is that there is a higher risk of exposure. Individuals are more likely to build lives and relationships in that normal world, increasing the number of situations that require or make more likely their world will be revealed. This type of hidden world can be better if you are looking to write a story with a cast of characters from both worlds, but not looking to explore the complex relationship of humanity meeting an essentially alien society for the first time. Geography. If your hidden world has no magic, no technological advantage, and an inability to blend in, then the one technique some writers rely on to keep their world secret is geography, but this too carries with it problems. It is most believable for the reader where the hidden world can wholly control travel between the unhidden world and hidden world. If they control the single or few ports of entry through an ancient magical portal, then they have far greater control over what information gets out. This strategy is common in old myths, featuring guardians to the otherworld like Heimdall guards the Bifrost to Asgard, or people have to be invited through Brú Enaboin to get to the Celtic Magsiuin. Other writers use it in tandem with the strategies discussed previously. For example, in Artemis Fowl, they have both technology and magic, but it is still not enough to ensure their secrecy and safety. In response, the people built their city, haven, deep enough in the Earth's crust that humanity could never find them. In isolating the hidden world geographically, consider two things. 1. How it affects the way that hidden people see the normal people. Does it create an us versus them mentality, or allow stereotypes to go unchallenged? Stereotypes inescapably paint others in a usually negative light. In Artemis Fowl, the people see humans as dumb, cruel, and beneath them because it is easy to manipulate them. Until Artemis Fowl comes along, Holly Short had nothing to counter this view of humans she had grown up with. 37 Inasmuch, as we would mythologize a group that we think exists in this mysterious hidden world, they would come up with strange ideas about us. 2. Hidden worlds that rely on geography tend to be more believable before the age of information with social media, satellites, mobile phones, and the internet that means detailed information can spread and be verified in an instant. Disbelief. There is one more strategy used to keep worlds hidden: disbelief. Sometimes the best thing to do is nothing because humans are remarkably good at ignoring things they do not want to see or rationalizing them in ways that will keep them sane. The truth might be out there, but does humanity really care about the truth? In Patricia Briggs' Moon Called, vampires leave those that go public about them alone, because it would draw attention, and nobody believes them anyway, except for Fox Mulder characters, of course, who make for great protagonists. As a world builder with this masquerade society, you do not need a 100% perfect method of preventing discovery. The world building just needs to make it rare enough that the normals do not bat an eye at the times information does get out. This means either the information is too rare, too inconsistent, or too unprovable, that anyone who is left believing it or spouting it is seen as a conspiracy theorist. Consider the following: if you heard that an entire town of 10,000 people on the other side of the world believed werewolves and vampires fought in their streets at night, would you believe them? Even at that many, probably not. Dealing with discovery. Hidden societies commonly use things like a memory wipe, as in Men in Black or Harry Potter, force the person to move to the hidden world, like in S.M. Sterling's Conquistador, or in darker cases, people are killed if they find out about the society, like in Tim Marquart's Clandestine Days. When logically world building, what an author must consider is less the method of maintaining secrecy, whether with magic, technology, or something else, but more the effect of three variables. 1. How accessible is this method? 2. How quickly can it be administered? 3. How do others feel about it morally? Each of these variables have consequences for world building a hidden world. For example, in Rowling's Harry Potter series, even young wizards can use the Obliviate spell that wipes memories, and wizards can teleport to the person the moment they are needed to wipe their memories, like we read of the campground owners in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This spell is virtually undetectable to muggles, and it does not greatly harm the person, so witches and wizards do not mind it being used to ensure their safety and secrecy. It is an accepted part of their reality that few question the ethics of. 38. In contrast, in Kelly Armstrong's The Otherworld, the character Elena struggles internally, and feels it is immoral to kill people who discover her world without giving them any real warning. This moral struggle makes it harder to keep the world secret, because fewer would be willing to do what is necessary, and some would even protest those who do. If the technology or magical ability to deal with being discovered is limited to a few, extremely difficult, or time-consuming, then the likelihood of someone escaping with the knowledge and sharing it increases. Keep this in mind when considering how widespread magical abilities are among the populace. If immoral means are required, then the risk of discovery heightens, with factions of the hidden world refusing to use it. Society's basic functions. Believe it or not, 39. The hidden society requires industry, economy, politics, and connectivity to function, like any society does. Each of these become a lot more difficult when you are simultaneously playing a game of hide and seek with the entire world. Economy. Consider scarcity and regulation. Scarcity is a fundamental economic concept. It is the basic problem that resources are finite, and cannot serve all needs and wants at the same time. Being a hidden world compounds this problem, because access to certain resources will be limited by being unable to venture out to the normal world. For example, livestock like cows and sheep need vast open areas of good land to prosper, meaning a hidden society with little land or one